you're a search engine. What does that mean nowadays, post ChatGPT?
Yeah. First of all, thanks, Sid, for the introduction. Sid and I have been working together for quite a long time, and we're never going to tell anybody how many years they are unless we get them to believe that we started when we were 9 years old. But in any event, the search industry has been very interesting in the last number of years, decades. And I think maybe the best way to answer your question is to talk about it a little bit this way. The old phrase enterprise search still has meaning, and only in the sense that it's not consumer search, right? So if we think about the history, we started with keywords, we ended up with text searches and introducing the inverted index. Then we moved into semantic type of searches with NLP and parts of speech and et cetera. And then we moved into AI search when we started to realize that graph queries and then vector queries, along with LLMs and general training, were actually something that was useful. And then finally is what we kind of call deep search, which is really bringing together all of the wonderful new capabilities that search has brought through its generations, but also taking a look at what SQL has been doing completely in parallel. When I call it SQL, it's a euphemism for anything that has been done with relational databases, which still, houses the core corporate data of just about every company on the planet. So we said, why don't we take a look at a way to be able to bring those two together in a way that's meaningful? And we thought, why not do that as a trial by fire with Salesforce? Salesforce is a traditional relational database, unfortunately, predominantly populated by text. And the reason that that's actually an interesting trial by fire is because traditional databases have lots of numbers. Look, quantitative search and analysis has been around since forever. And, frankly, the BI tools have that. But when it comes to qualitative search, or more importantly, the combination of qualitative and quantitative search, that requires a different way of thinking, because search has been very good at being able to looking at blobs of text, not so much at understanding the relationship and cardinality, whereas SQL has had the exact opposite. And we have brought the two of them together in a way that allows you in the Salesforce community, for example, to search deeply through content as if it was semantically part of the records in Salesforce and vice versa. So that's number one. Number two, we also realized that search is less about search. Salesforce went to market not because it said, I have a great relational database construct in the cloud. They said, hey, I've got a Sales Cloud product. I got a CRM. But what they really put out there was their platform. And it's the same thing with search. These days, it's less about search and more about what search provides. And what it provides is an ability to curate data in context within the workflow of a person's day-to-day management of information. And to do so in a way that actually the search is really there almost in the background in a lights out type of fashion. And to get an idea of kind of the applications that we're implementing today, Sid, in terms of what KonaSearch does, they range from talent matching, which is being able to match job orders to candidates and candidates to job orders, ultimately to say, here's a whole bag of job order descriptions, here's a whole bag of resumes, match them up. And then IP protection, a lights out system that monitors data coming in an organization and being able to find content that is inappropriate IP and locking it down. Legal case monitoring, notify me when people add dockets to my case. And I'm talking about federal cases and that sort of thing. And find me more cases like this one. Investment monitoring, executive dashboards, order automation, brand targeting, service automation, compliance monitoring. These are the types of new variations of applications we're building today, where the foundation behind them is the search engine. So I'm just going to show you one example of that one. But before I start there, I just want to say that I guess that answered your question in a detailed way there, Sid.
Outstanding. Absolutely. Yes. I love it. So depth is really about, right, understanding and traversing to the, through all of those linked objects and really getting to, some very deeply modeled thing. Is that, do I have that right?
Yeah, I mean, we understand the true essence of a search index, right? I mean, it's basically just name value pairs pointing to everything all over the place. Our schema is the same schema for every one of our customers, even though every experience they have is unique using KonaSearch. We did not want to screw around with ingestion models. And the only ingestion model that we have in there that's permanent, there's two of them, one for languages because we have to support every language that Salesforce has, and we have a strong office in Tokyo where we have some significant Japanese clients. And the second one is to understand OCR. So we use Tesseract as our backend, and we've added our own capabilities into Tesseract to enhance the clustering capabilities it provides. But in any event, the entire ingestion process and the schema is unique, is common across all of our clients. It's very, very abstracted, but the reality is that when we index all that content, even though it presents a unique experience, the reality is that it all goes in a schema, and most of it is handling the cardinality that is inherent across relationships in relational databases.
Cool. So give me an example. It looks like you've got one.
Yeah. So here is a very typical one. So we built a demo. It's always building demos in the search industry. The hard part is trying to find data. So what we did here is we decided, why don't we just index the New York Stock Exchange and then go out and grab all of their annual reports out of edgar.gov under the SEC website. So we did that. And in fact, we're going to light it up as a portal that can be used for public access and updated once a day and see if people are interested in the information. So I have let's say I have a query that says I'm a PE company, and somebody comes to me and says, I want to invest in companies that are listed on the New York Stock Exchange and related exchanges, and they are in the real estate, financial, healthcare, or IT sectors, and that they have a market cap greater than $30 billion, a share price lower than $200, and a PDE of at least 10, and are committed to diversity in the workplace. That's the qualitative segment. So I'm going to flip over and show you that in an actual demo here. So give me 1 second.
Cool.
There we go. All right. Can everybody see my page?
Yes. Yes, I see your screen.
Yeah, okay, great. So this is just a typical search page. It can look very different from client to client. It's also in Salesforce. So those of you who are familiar with Salesforce, you might recognize the sort of layout. But in any event here, here's an investment search page. I just came back. I've got, right now, I've got 164 results showing up here because I have these various sectors. But if I clear out all my filters and I do a run, I'll show, 8,745 entries or listings. All right, so let's say, for example, I want to introduce that query. Now I can enter all this stuff manually here, but we're short on time, so I just saved it as a query in our saved environment. And when I run that query, I end up with 8 results. So here you can see the quantitative components putting in at a filter level, and the qualitative one is put into the search query, but it can be put in and devised many different ways. In any event, that query has resulted in a set of SEC filings. You'll notice here that we're doing deep searches through the filings themselves, PDFs, some of them are OCR, so on and so forth. And we also have the quantitative data in here as well, which actually sits in various different tables through the relationships. For example, we want to show the CEO. Yeah, the CEO happens to be a contact record as a child on the account record for the listing. But it gives you an idea of how deep we can go into these things. In any event here, you'll see that we aren't just looking for every occurrence of employee and diversity. We're finding all the ones that are within 5 words of each other. Near operators, for anybody who's used to the search industry, are very common. There's many other operators in our language. And in our particular environment, there are customers, like in recruiting, who really like the idea of typing in Boolean queries. There are others who just want to point and click to get where they want. And then there are others who are actually very much interested in being able to take context from another object or another record and say, I want to open up the search page with a pre-run search based on the salient features or just a fuzzy profile of the record I'm in. We provide that capability as well, but for timing here, because we're running out of time, I've just shown you this one example. But in any event, this is where, for example, you can take a job description, paste it in, or pull it off the page automatically, and then it runs a search of all the candidates that fit that job description. It's just a blob of text. And underneath that, of course, is vector querying, which is very much what we're using. We're kind of using a variation of ChatGPT underneath that.
So I was going to ask Andrew, please tell me a little bit about what's under the hood, just in a minute or so, if you would. I'd love to hear about it.
All right, sure, I can do that. So let me stop my sharing here. What is under the hood? So we have, we're all in the cloud, just like Salesforce is. And in the cloud, we run our own grid. We have a grid sitting in Frankfurt for EMEA and to keep GDPR and the Germans very happy. And then we have the grid in Virginia to keep, for the Americas. And then we have one in Tokyo for the Pacific Rim. And in these grids, we run a very highly sharded solar construct. We index into HBase as a queue, and then we use streaming, Spark streaming, et cetera, to push it into our system, which we have as a triple redundant high availability setup. We also just went up to 9.1, and we're now doing query sharding because we are getting indexes over 1 billion records now.
Wow.
So this is, and everybody wants query response time less than 2 seconds. So what is interesting about this environment is that we also realize that our customers want to keep the eyeballs in Salesforce, but they have heterogeneous environments with various sources. And this is where Swirl comes in.
I was about to ask you.
Yep. So we have realized that what we'd like to offer our customers is a configurable level. Because remember, Salesforce customers, it's like try and go. If you got to read documentation and you got to figure it out in more than 15 minutes, they round file your product. So in this particular case here, we want to configure it so that if you want deep search capabilities and a lot of the deep analytics we do, especially across structured and unstructured, we'll index the data, whether it's from SharePoint or by default from Salesforce or from another legacy CRM, for example. But you may want not to bother with that extra lift. They don't care about the index lift because that's us. That's what we provide in the cloud as our service. But we have an AWS GovCloud client who has to maintain that service. And frankly, they would be preferred not to maintain that whole grid themselves, and they'd be happy if it was all shallow. Well, we all used to call that federated search, and pretty much all the federated searches in the past have been kind of dumb. Here's my 8 lists of sorted results. I don't know how to put them together. Who's number 1? And along comes what you guys have been doing with Swirl, and I was very intrigued with it because now there's a way to be able to get some decent relevancy across the sources. And then also to be able to learn from that. And that, I think, is really a key differentiator. So we want to roll Swirl into our product so that people have a choice. Shallow, we don't even call it, this is federated or indexed.
Yeah.
Here are 2 examples where there is no choice but to use federated. One, privacy reasons. We have a client who says, like every Salesforce customer says, none of our CEOs like to use Salesforce. They're just too clicky. So we built an executive dashboard. The CEO liked it so much, he did the opposite. He made every other user in the company use that as their dashboard. And that dashboard, executive dashboard, is just, it shows up and it gives them a finger on the pulse of the qualitative conversations that are going on about his customers and his company. Well, what he would like to include in there is email. Now, personally, the CEO would like it if we index the entire Exchange server for all of his employees. That's not going to happen because the HR department will stomp on that one. But the reality is that each individual can now swirl out, I'm going to turn into a verb now, swirl out to their Outlook email. We get it on demand, and we can still integrate it back into the search results from the Salesforce data. That's example number 1, privacy reasons. Example number 2, we are very big in the recruiting, executive search, and staffing industry. And in that industry, there are needs to get to the job boards. LinkedIn, what is the LinkedIn service they use? I can't remember what it's called. LinkedIn
Navigator.
Recruiter or Navigator, whatever it is. Yeah. And in that particular case, if you want to spend this much money, you can go and download everything. If you want to spend that much money, you just search it. So guess what they would love to have? Why don't you just search it through a federated search, grab that information and roll that back into your environment? And what I really like about Swirl is we can actually index that stuff that we swirled back in and actually learn on that to be able to provide a much more integrated relevancy model when all the data comes back in. So, and then on top of that, we add in the semantic relationship back to the records in Salesforce. So I think it's a wonderful marriage.
I agree, right? I think as you said, the user wants to stay, the Salesforce user wants to stay in Salesforce, right? The other silos are lesser, and they're important. I think every salesperson knows they're important. I was just chatting with a partner at one of the big firms, and he was talking about shallow search because he's saying, the reality is, to use your phrase, the variations in sales performance are at least somewhat due to who knows where to go to get the really interesting angle on a customer, right? And
yeah.
So that's the thing. So, but people tend not to leave that environment, especially not systematically. There's a whole sort of like tier of analysts who do very little but do partner research, right? They're essentially doing the work for them, going from silo to silo. So the combination here, which is I think what you're talking, what we've talked about, right, is using Swirl to get a shallow take, get the deep take out of Salesforce, because no salesperson is going to want a shallow take on the data that they know the best, and give them a combination.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, the source of record for your operations generally is in a relational model somewhere. That thing, hey, go all deep on it because you've already invested a lot into that operation, and everything you add to it pays dividends because everybody's using it. However, in a heterogeneous environment where you have ancillary content all over the place in silos, if you can bring it in semantically in a practical, pragmatic way, which means that all you need to do is a shallow reach to it and a shallow search and still be able to understand that, then I think that that actually revolutionizes how people consume the information that's in their environment. Now, what we do is we add in addition to that, search is no longer, I'm going to do my regular job and then go over here, run a bunch of questions, get some answers, and go back to what I'm doing. It's now part of your flow. It's a context-aware curation engine that says, oh, I'm matching, or I am automating, or I'm doing something that actually curates the information. We've had so many decades of people building massive systems that talk about how do you manage workflow and change in your company. You get wonderful little diagrams, Gantt charts, and everything else. The processes from step to step, those have been optimized ad nauseum for the last 30 years, right? You can't get them any better. But what really eats up all the time is getting the information from that one little process over to that little process over there, and all the errors that happen between them. So we see it now as a way to provide intelligence to the conduits. And any way that we can do that in a way that's flexible and pragmatic to how the organization is set up, and I look at that as how Swirl and KonaSearch works together, is actually, I think, a key differentiator in how information is consumed in the enterprise.